E nā mana, e nā iwi, e nā reo, ki te whānau hui hui nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you, Sarah and Edward, and thank you, Colmar Brunton, for bringing us the Better Futures report. For 10 years, you've been asking New Zealanders what they think about sustainability, and you did it from the beginning because you thought it mattered. There was no client asking you to do it, and there was no client offering to pay. And so thank you for your prescience and for your ongoing commitment, and thank you for the gift that you continue to make of it for all of us. We pay attention, and you can see how much it matters given how full this room is today. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Abbie Reynolds. I'm the Executive Director of the Sustainable Business Council. We're a membership organisation for businesses that want to be the best for New Zealand. We've got 106 members now, and they're mostly large businesses. And for many of them, their primary customers are Kiwis. So understanding how New Zealanders are thinking about sustainability is really important to them. And again, I think that's why this is always such a well-attended event. Equally, I don't think many of our members would have been surprised by how important plastic pollution is turning up for New Zealanders now. And we can't really blame Kiwis for getting to this point. You know, it's dominated the news. Social media is full of these images of seabirds or turtles full of plastic waste. I have a friend who's a vet at Auckland Zoo, and I saw the photos of the amount of plastic she took out of a turtle that she had to operate on. We see pictures of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And then David Attenborough, his call to action in Blue Planet 2 had a really profound impact on people, not just in the UK, but across the whole world. And I think that's really changed people's attitudes as well. In fact, it's so high in the public consciousness that the Prime Minister's Chief Science Advisor, Juliet Gerard, has chosen plastic for her first major project and report to the Prime Minister. And she's convened a panel on this issue. And we met last week for our first meeting. And already their scope includes needing to get better data on plastic and how we're using it in New Zealand, doing a life cycle assessment of plastics in this country, identifying all of the innovations that are happening. And I've just been speaking to Karen about what's happening at Coke, and so we'll be keen to hear the panel about that. But also the conversation we need to start about how we change our relationship with plastic in New Zealand. And complex and challenging as all of this is, I know that many of our SBC members are really working hard to respond to public concern. Air New Zealand has already made a commitment to phase out single-use plastics from their flights. We've already spoken about Countdown, but they were really ahead of the curve in terms of ditching plastic bags, and they did it well before the government ban, in fact probably in part prompting that ban. I know they're also working through their supply chain to identify more opportunities to remove plastic as well. And they, alongside New Zealand Post and a number of our other members, have signed up to the Plastic Packaging Declaration, which commits them to using 100% renewable, recyclable and compostable packaging across their global operations, not just locally, by 2025 or earlier. And all of that takes really significant effort and investment. And I know there are lots of other great stories about what businesses are doing on plastic, which I just can't talk about here. But what I think is really fascinating about what's happened with plastic is how quickly this concern went from being one amongst a bunch of issues for consumers to the centre of their concern. That happened very fast. As Sarah's already said, the question about plastic was only added to the Colmar Brunton survey for the first time last year. And now here we are, number one issue for New Zealanders. And the pace of that change has really left a bunch of our businesses on the hop. Even our best businesses, who've been working on plastic for some time, I think have been pretty daunted by the scale of the concern and the level of expectation from their customers. And I think they're also a bit daunted by how quickly our customers are expecting us to be able to respond. When China stopped taking our recyclable plastic and our soft plastics recycling program had to be put on hold, I think we all probably started to appreciate that we don't have a lot of infrastructure for dealing with plastic in New Zealand when it's end of life. And resolving that, something that takes time, it takes investment for us to correct it. There's an entire ecosystem that needs to be developed here. But the speed of the consumer reaction is such that They are telling us that they want it fixed so much faster than we are going to be able to. And then when you consider that 90% of New Zealanders, even if it is a slightly inflated figure, are telling us that they'll stop buying our products and services if we behave unethically or irresponsibly, we've got to start asking ourselves, how much is too much plastic unethical or irresponsible? Will failing to address plastic in time be something that they start to punish us for? Can we be expecting to lose customers and lose sales if we're not addressing this issue that they've raised with us quickly enough? And I think the piece of this that interests me is the scale of the consumer response to this a trend? Can we expect other sustainability issues to capture the public attention in the same way? I think there are some features about plastics which make it a little bit unique. A lot of people ask me whether we can do to climate change what's happened with plastic. But I do think there are some things about plastic which make it a bit special for Kiwis, for people at home. You know, when I take plastic home, when I buy something in plastic, it's my responsibility to figure out whether it can be recycled and what I do with it. I'm responsible. It's waste that I've generated. And for me, the plastic packaging seems largely irrelevant, unnecessary. I haven't had to go on the journey with whatever product it is, from its point of manufacture through all of its logistics to a warehouse and then ultimately to a supermarket or a store. I haven't seen how that plastic has protected me from contamination. For me, it's an unnecessary item that I've got to figure out how to deal with. And if I'm paying attention, it turns out it's a thing that's killing lots of people, lots of species in the oceans. So my experience of plastic is I don't need it. And my life is not made worse by having to give it up. So you can see, if that's the experience other consumers are having of plastic, why it's so easy for them to feel like this is something that they can act on. And I think this is why it's a little bit different from climate change. Climate change is going to require some pretty profound behaviour change from individuals. You know, we're already starting to see people talk about this, but it's, you know, giving up flying or giving up driving or giving up meat. There's a lot that we have to do differently. And realistically, when we think about climate change, the biggest impacts are going to come from a few very big businesses doing things quite profoundly differently. So I do think plastics are a bit special, and we can't necessarily assume that just because that's gone straight to the centre of consumer concern, other sustainability issues will. On the other hand, what this research has showed us is that 40% of New Zealanders are saying that they're committed to living a sustainable lifestyle. I mean, that's really significant. I remember last year when I was talking about 30% and saying to people, come on people, 30%, that's a market segment. 40%, this is really a big deal. If 40% of Kiwis are telling us that this is something that matters to them. And last year, the growth in the number was driven by women, the over 60s and low income earners. And I thought that was really interesting. And I was speaking to Sarah earlier this week, and she said, actually, this time round, it's even across genders, across age, across, you know, income. So sustainability is in the mainstream now for people. The significance, though, is the trend. It's the growth. It's the 25 in 2016. It's the 30 in 2017. It's the 40 in 2018. If this trend continues, more than half of New Zealanders are going to be telling us next year that they are highly committed to living a sustainable lifestyle. And they really need us as businesses to help them live up to that aspiration. They need us to keep developing sustainable, low-cost products and services. They need us to talk to them about sustainability in a way that makes sense in their lives. And they need us to make it easy for them to make sustainable choices. We all need to get better at this. And if we're going to get ahead of that curve, rather than having to respond reactively, which is what plastic taught us, is we need to get better at looking ahead. We need to give ourselves time to develop the products and services that we think our customers are going to need and want in 3 to 5 years' time, not just what they're demanding today. What plastics has taught us is that we need lead time to be able to respond to their changing demands. And I start to wonder what those sorts of things are going to be. We know that concern on climate change is growing, over 50% for the first time. So are our customers going to expect us to be offering them zero carbon food and drinks? Are they going to be looking for more vegan options? It sounds like it. Are they going to be looking for products that help them sequester carbon? Or do they want real-time emissions tracking? There's also growing coverage of our 6th extinction event and the biodiversity loss that we're currently experiencing. Recent coverage includes concerns about a massive reduction in the number of insects, which are the foundation of so many of our ecosystems. When is that issue going to turn up as a centre of concern for New Zealanders and for people around the world? And how would we all respond? There's also a growing conversation about the future of work and jobs and them being displaced by robots or AI. What's that going to mean for our customers in the future? And so for me, it's slightly obvious when I say doing sustainability well is absolutely a part of the answer to this. If you can embed sustainability in your business and be thinking about these trends, you'll be a little bit ahead of the curve at least, because part of having a great sustainability function is people who are thinking about these things that are of concern to people who are still in the 10 or the 20%, but who will eventually get to the 50% over time. But equally, I think the thing that this research really points out to me is that at 40%, any of you businesses who are doing insight work in your own right should be including questions about sustainability as standard. Now's the time to understand how it's turning up in your segment. Colmar Brunton have given us a great gift of being able to answer the question about how much New Zealanders care, but what does it mean in individual segments? How's it turning up? And I think that's a really important thing to start to understand. So if you're very nice, I'm sure Sarah and Edward would be very prepared to help you answer those questions. And I also know there's a whole bunch more data that sits under the work they've done today, so if you're looking for a more bespoke report, make sure you speak to them afterwards. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.